ESG for everyone, large corporates, MSMEs, social enterprises, and non-for-profits. Moving ahead, we'll request our moderator to join us on the stage. He's the CEO, United Way Delhi, comes with 22 years of rich and diverse experiences working with diverse stakeholders and partnerships, which include civil societies, governments, for-profit corporations, managing large programs, using diverse sources of funding and deep exposure to programs across several thematic areas in several countries. Everyone, let's please put our hands together for Mr. Sachin Golwalkar. Sir, thank you so much for joining in. We have a very dedicated moderator. He's already on the stage to start with the panel discussion. Our next panelist who's joining us on the stage, we have CEO Tricolite Electrical Industries. Everyone, let's please put our hands together for Mr. Rajiv Gupta with a total experience coming out with 30 years, everyone. By the way, also to mention, his book titled The Good Indian Employee's Guide to Surviving a Lala Company, that has been published by HarperCollins, is receiving rave reviews and is on its way to become the bestseller. Rajiv sir, congratulations for that too. He's joined the panel. Moving ahead, we have Miss Anu Mehta. Everyone, let's please put our hands together. Head CSR at Honda Cars India Limited. She's here, coming with the human resource professional, 25 years of experience, combined expertise across multicultural environment in strategic HR management. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining in. Our next panelist we have is Dr. Sanjay Kumar. Everyone, let's please put our hands together. President, Harvard Club of India and founder, Edjustice Foundation, and has recently joined as the country head, University of Toronto Centre in India. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Ravi Sreedharan. Everyone, let's please put our hands together. Founder, Indian School of Development Management. He's here, since the time he's joining in its 7 years of existence. ISDM has been doing path-breaking work across the flagship PGP and DM programs. We have this amazing, talented panelist among us. Over to the moderator, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, post-lunch sessions, always difficult. Thank you, to the India ESG Network for the invite. So all the sessions have already, in the morning sessions, have highlighted the importance of ESG in today's context. And we don't have to really have somebody out there tell us this, because everyday life is a, struggle as far as air quality is concerned, other water quality is concerned. We live and breathe these things. We have 10 out of the top 50 most polluted cities in the world. And, these are alarming, figures for us or any society. So the time of action for all is now, yeah? And we need an ecosystem approach. And here, the panel is about ESG for everyone. Everyone as in big players, MSMEs, governments, the individuals, the non-government organizations, although I don't like the word non-government because it more sounds like Shiva, who is defined like one who is not. यानी वो जो नहीं हो तो उससे आपका you don't define yourselves by something you are not, but well, that is the accepted nomenclature, but I prefer the social impact organizations. And I'll just cover in 1 minute before I hand over to the other panelists. United Way is one of the old 135-year-old global organizations working in more than 40 countries. In India, we work with more than 250 corporations on various mandates, whether they are CSR, donations. It's largely social impact agendas. We work across the themes, and we are really happy to be a part of the ecosystem. In the individual capacity, I was a part of co-authoring one of the impact standards, social impact standards for the social impact space. So there is one of the issues which we did figure out is standardization of reporting, yeah, which is very clear for the corporate in terms of the various global reporting standards, etc. But there is not much for the social impact, in terms of standardization of impact. And that is what we have actually tried to work upon. So I'll come straight to the point because we are short of time. And so Mr. Rajiv, your company is one of the top ones in the segment. And you have seen this ESG discourse very closely. So would really like you to reflect upon how have you seen this entire journey evolve? For your segment as well as your own company. What have been some of the conversations? How do you see this versus competition, etc., etc.? And it would be really with your experience and wisdom in the sector, we would like to get those insights on where do you see also this go.
Okay, so thank you. So I'll talk more from the MSME perspective. Of course, worked with larger companies now earlier and now in an MSME sector. So we are the largest manufacturers of electrical switchboards. And I think part A of any ESG initiative is compliance, right? I think that's a no-brainer because if I want to continue to operate in the country, I have to follow the law. So I need to monitor what am I sending out in the environment and what's the water I'm consuming and what am I putting in the drain. So that's, of course, it's part of the compliance, we do it. Second, I see a lot of people talking about solar energy. So we've also installed a solar plant. But here again, I think it is the economics which is driving me there. Of course, there's environmental concern, but I'm not only saving, the carbon which I'm putting out, but I'm also saving, economically it's making sense. But I think for our sector, what is important is that are you doing something which is not binding on you as a law, from the law's point of view, or it's not making economic sense. So, for example, that's where I think, the human initiative and the focus comes in. So, for example, we have done many things voluntarily. One is we have taken a target of beyond what is my permitted level of water consumption, how can I dramatically and drastically reduce it? Okay, so for example, the water that comes out, the wastewater of the RO. So we are recycling it, using it in gardening and various other things. Also, we've taken a clear target. We are allowed to put, of course, we have an ETP, again, that's compliance, But we have taken a target that in 24-25, there will be zero, water going into the drain. Okay, so we'll put a bore well, whatever we will do, along with rainwater harvesting. So that's a clear initiative. So third, we see, this entire ESG business as, air, water, and solid. So when we come to solid, we have inward packing material. We have outward packing material. And of course, you can have cardboard, wood, but plastic is inevitable. So what we do is, again, for solid waste, we classify into plastic, wood, paper, and e-waste. And one thing that we do as an organization is not to just say, okay, here's my waste, please take it and do whatever. But we ensure that the person, the recycler to whom we are giving it, is he really recycling it? So that's, the buck doesn't stop at, something leaves my factory premises. So that's what we do additionally. And, so I think that this whole business of ESG has to be driven by, what you really feel passionately about. And of course, the functional leaders in my company, including me, we are all responsible for P&L. And a question that I often ask and the board asks is, you review finance every month. You review the sales numbers, EBITDA, people, quality. But is there a forum where you review what are you doing for ESG? Is there a forum where people say, look, I have done this and I have saved this much for the environment. So this is what we have started, and it's a monthly kind of a meeting and it's absolutely informal, but just to bring attention of the people. And last point I want to make is that it is happening, it's very easy to pat ourselves on the back, but the important thing is that, the promoters of a company, they're extremely passionate about it, and I'm very happy to see this glass bottle. So for example, we have lots of expatriates coming in, And mostly the mineral water bottles you get in India are plastic, but that's not permitted in our company. So it has to be a glass bottle. And I'm just giving you an example that, you may remain thirsty, but a plastic bottle won't come in. And I think the champion, whoever is championing the ESG in the company, has to also be empowered person. Otherwise, it will just remain, one of the things to do, and you'll have some review meeting, but nothing will move at the end of the year. So I think this ESG thing really has to stop. The buck has to stop at the board, and there has to be that feeling that really we got to do something about it. And then, as I mentioned, these are just 3 or 4 things, but many more things then can get manifested and get really scaled up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Very insightful. And it's great to hear so many measures being taken at your company, and role modeling right at the top of it, and percolating down to the organization, moving the needle from the point which you said is actually from a conservative approach where you're just looking at compliance, moving to idealist, push the boundaries at all levels. So, all the best to, all your mission. Moving to Ms. Mehta, thank you for being here. And, with Honda, one of the MNCs, top MNCs in the space, and obviously a Japanese, lens of efficiency, etc. Would like to hear your perspective, because in the ESG, you have the environment is there, the social is there, where actually you look at, in the earlier panel we talked about diversity and inclusion, well-being of people, the CSR space also basically is also something which is an integral part of the ecosystem in many ways, How do you, from management level see how the social agenda, and also, how the interplay of these different, things are taking place within your company?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Vikranji, for inviting me. It's nice to come here and share certain thoughts on ESG. And I have a small presentation to make. So I will explain to you in context of my career. My career in Honda spans across human resources, administration, IR, safety, security, legal, and CSR. As it was said, that we need to. So it was like said by Vikranji that we need to look at all the aspects. So I thought to myself, CSR comes to me very automatically now because I've been doing it for the past 5 years. So let me look at it in terms of, let me look at ESG in terms of other aspects as well. I'll take you through a small presentation and I'll explain to you what it means. ESG, of course, all of you know, means environmental, social, and governance. But what does it mean to us as corporates, as big organizations is, these are certain practices, some policies, some matrices, some procedures that we follow, that we implement, which either they limit the negative impact or enhance positive impact on the environment, society, and governance bodies. Some of the examples of ESG are mentioned there in terms of environmental, there are carbon emissions that you look at, air and water pollution, deforestation, green energy initiatives, etc. On the social aspect, you have something like equal opportunity, training and qualification, human rights, and on the social aspect, you also have CSR as a perspective. And when we look at governance, so compliance, business ethics, board diversity and structure, tax strategy, etc. Now, if I'm to look at some of the examples of sustainability in terms of environment, so first I start with the environment and give you some examples of Honda. In terms of the plant has been made in such a manner, you can see that there is a provision for day lighting, that is natural lighting within the plant. So it avoids switching on tube lights and other equipment to actually create light. When we talk about the shop floor, so we have air circulation fans. These are called HVTL fans, and one fan takes care of 15 normal fans. They're energy efficient, and they make sure that we conserve energy. When we talk about our parking, so our parking in the plant itself is of solar panels, made of solar panels. So because of which, you don't need some separate parking to be made, and you have solar energy being generated. Solar rooftops, you can see the entire plant has solar rooftop. Most of our energy is generated from there, and we hardly take any supply from outside. When we talk about recharge wells, so we do rainwater harvesting, and we make sure that we keep the water balance. Ours is also a zero liquid discharge. Water recycling is done within the plant. So any, because we make cars and there's a lot of paint effluent which comes out, so that is treated, and then this wastewater is used within the plant to water plants and keep the green area intact. So ours is a zero discharge in plant. When we talk about ESG in the context of HR, the biggest role of HR is basically to create a conducive environment for employees to stay engaged and perform, right? So with that perspective, we look at what are the roles that HR should do. From the company's perspective, if we were to look at it, if employees are engaged, then we make sure that the business reputation is good. We ensure the success of business. We also ensure profitability. So that's there from the organization's perspective. What can be done by HR? So what is done by HR is we implement effective policies. First, we make effective policies. Second, we implement effective policies. And we make sure that we take care of things like discrimination, harassment, bullying, exploitation. Most of my career, as I said, in human resources in Honda was actually, I joined Honda in a stage where we were actually implementing policies. In fact, my mentor is also sitting here, Mr. Kumar Sharma, with whom I have worked the longest in my career. And I, along with Sir, we were responsible for making all these HR policies and practices and then implementing. And we went on to make beautiful policies. And if I look at Honda, we have implemented them very nicely without any discrimination, without any disparity. They've all been put into place. Training your people sitting in the senior levels of the organization to make sure that they can identify cases of discrimination and come back to HR saying that this is what it is, and we can resolve the same. Diversity and inclusion, in terms of gender parity, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of age, disability, social mobility, taking care of all those aspects. Mental health and well-being, and also work-life balance. Make sure that people are happy when they come to office. There's less of absenteeism, sickness, menopause-related issues, hidden disabilities, they don't suffer from them. And you take care of their careers. In terms of recruitment and retention, multi-generation workforce, you have all kinds of people. You have people who are there in their 50s. You also have people who are just joined you, who are just 22 years of age. So there's a lot of gap. How do you match that? Aging population, shrinking talent pool, immigration, and also automation for that matter. In perspective of Honda, I think we've done a lot of work around this, and this is more towards governance. Now, if I look at it in terms of CSR, in fact, you would see that ESG and CSR have been used very interchangeably by companies because they are different angles of measuring the same thing, which is a company's impact on the society, right? So if I explain to you in context of Honda, our vision itself is committed to being a company that society would want to exist. So we come from there, and this is our global vision, right? So in terms of CSR, we do a lot of work in the 4 areas, which is education, healthcare, environment, and road safety. And we partner with government bodies, community, credible NGOs. We make detailed action plans. We do a lot of gap analysis. First, find out what is the situation, what project should we work on, and then we do a lot of impact assessment of all our projects. We don't have so much of time, so I'll only talk about education as an area and what we have done. In terms of education, how we looked at the whole perspective of CSR was that education should finally end somewhere. Where does it end? It should end in employment. So what should we do? Our journey should be from education till employment. So our strategy was that we do infrastructure development of schools, colleges. We do skilling in the schools and colleges, and also we make sure that we make people employable. On the slide there, you can see, 3 of the schools that we have. They're government schools, which we did up completely, so the before-after situation of all the 3 schools can be seen. That was as far as the infrastructure was to be provided. But if you work only on the infrastructure, it doesn't help, right? So we need to work on the students, on the teachers. And their government teachers and their students studying in government schools. So we started a project 3 years back on skill and education upgradation in all the 3 schools. These 3 schools have been adopted by Honda. And what we did was we did a thorough need assessment, found out as to what is not working. We understood that we cannot just concentrate on academics. We need to look at the overall development of children, right? So for students, we started looking at areas like behavior, academics, sports, extracurricular activities, employability generation. For teachers also, what do we do in terms of their capacity building? Because they are government teachers, right? And they stay with the school. So it's good to make their capabilities better so that our initiatives become sustainable. So agencies were selected. We have a good NGO partner who works with us. But it is purely driven by us. Academics, we teach in our schools through digital labs. There are STEM labs, there are smart classrooms. We do teacher capability building. We do career counseling, group and individual career counseling. On the behavioral front, we attacked all kinds of issues, right from value education, right from discipline to honesty, punctuality, personality development, anything and everything, and we do it. Extracurricular activities, we do a lot of work on sports. Extracurricular activities are honed for kids. Some of the project outcomes in the 3 schools which we worked for the past 3 years, admissions have doubled. In fact, in one of the schools, it doubled in 3 months of our having opened the school after COVID. Parents, in fact, shifted their children from private schools into our schools. Average attendance moved up from 65% to 99%. Academic scores went up greatly. There were none of the students were failing in the exams. They were all passing. And you can see some of the top scores there, 92 and 87%. Proficiency in computers increased from 5% to 89%. Their positive results are kids win a lot of sports competitions in terms of district levels and national level and also state level competitions. Intangible benefits. When I used to walk into the schools, when we took up this particular project, the principals would look at me and think to themselves, oh, she's come again, now she'll lecture us that this is not okay, right? From that kind of a mindset, now there is, when we walk into the schools, there is an acceptance and they tell you all the good things that have happened. Motivation of the students have increased so much so that when we took up this project, so the kids would come at 11:30, eat the midday meal and would leave the school, right? And now they come at the school timing, they stay for the entire time and they study and you can see the results. There was a lot of improvement in terms of hygiene, behavior, value system, and a lot of improvement in the students, right? In terms of their confidence also, we were able to boost that a lot. We were able to garner a lot of support from the government as well. And in fact, there was a principal who has to be, she was retiring and the new one had to come. So we were able to actually identify a principal and bring her into the school in which we wanted her to manage. The students that have passed from class 10 to class 12 in all these 3 schools, there are 3 routes that we have chartered from them. If they do a 10th or a 12th, they can do an ITI and they can go to HVTI, which is Honda Vocational Training Institute, which is being run by Unifiers, Vikranji, and they can take up technical courses as well as they can also do soft skill training, and this acts like a finishing school, and then they can be placed with the industry. The second route that we have for our children is they can do vocational trainings. This is just starting off this project, where vocational trainings will be done in all the 3 adopted schools. We'll run some specialized vocational courses, and then post that we will place them in the industry. And the third thing that we are going to do, and we're going to start the construction in April, is be making a government girls college in Tapukada. And this will be a hybrid college which will have vocational as well as degree courses running in it. So that's about Honda's journey as far as the education part of CSR is concerned. I think I've covered all the ESG aspects and explained to you as to what we have been doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mehta. Again, very insightful to see what all you have been doing as a company across the 3 pillars. And especially in great detail, the CSR space, which is more on the life cycle approach, hence for the long term which you have adopted these. So I think it's very key that companies engage on a long term basis and see the outcomes through. And that's remarkable. So congratulations on that. So Dr. Kumar, coming to you, you have been in the policy space, and we would really like to hear from you in terms of the thoughts about where do we currently stand, what are the really framework or implementation related, execution related challenges, in the ecosystem. Yeah, and just because the time is short, maybe
I'll be very short.
And from your Harvard,
I'll be very short.
Network experiences,
Yeah.
what are the kind of conversations which are currently happening?
Certainly. So I think more than like policy, I wanted to throw some light on what kind of action we need to decentralize the conversation. Most of the conversation which is happening around ESG and climate change. So the climate change conversation is happening in the policy circle, and the ESG conversation is happening around the corporate circle. So these are 2 tracks which is happening, and most of the conversation in both the tracks are happening in the bigger cities. So how do we decentralize? How do we take this down to the smaller towns or the villages? Because even if we are talking about climate change or ESG, and if we are not involving people, and if we are not involving MSMEs or smaller factories and smaller organizations, then are we doing justice to the conversation, or are we doing justice to the cause? What we are trying to save, the planet, the earth, our country, our rivers, everything. So that is what I wanted to just bring up, so that we all are responsible for that. And why it is important? Because I have noted down a few points. So as I said, the impact of climate change and sustainable living applies to smaller towns and villages too. And life of everyone on the earth is so much connected. It's not that we are not connected. And then a lot of people are being affected in areas that are not exposed to such conversation. Organizations such as small and medium enterprises, NGOs, educational institutions are either not aware of the effect, or the large term benefits of focusing on ESG. So how do we, and ESG not being followed by, it's also that, what we are seeing, I will just give you one brief example. I was talking to one of my friends who is running a startup, and I was just trying to gather some information around ESG compliance from him. And he said point blank that, these are all, the compliance is for compliance, for paperwork. It's not that we are really investing on it. So it's to show the investors that we are compliant. So are we, or only the big corporates are doing what we all are supposed to do, or how do we engage startups also in the conversation, in the actual implementation that is not happening? So how we can, some of the suggestions which I think that are relevant, and how should we do it, that the network is a great start. For example, what Vikrant has taken initiative to launch the network, this can actually go a level down, 2 level down to smaller towns and have similar kind of conversation, because people really don't understand how to frame things. We are intellectually probably in a room or in a city, in a place where we are talking about all these things. But if you go to smaller towns, people don't talk about such things. So how do we, as a network, if you start building it, from and go a level down or level 2 down, then it can really bring them into the fold, and there could be meaningful conversation. Also, it might be useful for this network or any other effort through CSR also, for example, Honda or any other organizations which have big state presence. How do we map the relevant organizations, institutions that can really play a very impactful role? And here I am talking not only about the campus of a company, not just about the campus of Honda or Tricolite or XYG, any company. How do we take the conversation beyond the companies as CSR and involve institutions, involve people in this? I think educational institutions can play a very important and very crucial role, as ma'am was talking about what they have done in the educational institutions. But I would suggest that how do we utilize their presence in the community to discuss about climate change, to raise awareness in whatever way we want to raise awareness. That can be also very a big work or big impactful work for the society. So what I'm trying to say is that whatever CSR work the corporates are doing, how do you involve educational institutions, or not only CSR but in any other form? If we involve educational institutions and students as our mascots, as our ambassadors, to bring the message down to the community level. So for example, I have founded a foundation called Edjustice Foundation. So Edjustice is basically education justice for poor students. So what we are trying to do through Edjustice, one of the activities, one of the programs, is to launch something called Climate Ed, and through which we are reaching out, we are running MUNs in the schools, MUN on climate change, MUN related to climate change in the public funded schools, the government schools, so that the students can understand more about the impact of climate change, and they can be ambassadors and they can take the message down to their families, whatever we want to flag the message. And then, the other important thing could be women's groups. In India, we have in all the states, in most of the smaller towns and in villages, we have self-help groups or any other form of economic institution of poor women. They can be also very, very important group which can play a very important role in order to build awareness and take the message down. So they can also be very, very useful. And, I was thinking about when I was listening to Rajiv ji's whatever thought he was sharing, and also about Honda. There are so many companies which are doing activities inside the factory or inside the campus. How do you mobilize your vendors? There are so many vendors in your supply chain. There are so many people involved in your supply chain. How do you also bring change in the supply chain? So the idea is, to sum it up, what I'm trying to say is that if we are looking at ESG, let's not just look at a company level. Let's look beyond company, beyond factory. Let's look down to the community level, down to the village level, and see how we can create a movement out of it. Because the climate change conversation and this ESG conversation, that needs to go together. And if we don't bring the action on the ground or to the last mile or to the grassroots level, I don't think that we can achieve more. I will stop here, and I'm happy to engage in further conversation, and I'm happy to answer any question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Kumar. Again, just from the couple of points which you mentioned, one is actually about the growing, always there is a disparity, where between the intellects and the non, or the people with resources and non, and there are these layers, and always you see that there is a gap which needs to be bridged, at a continuous, and there is an effort which is required. There is a cost to it, and so on and so forth. But, point valid, even Kanta was sharing earlier that, women's participation, yeah? You talked about actually, what about the rural, yeah? What about the people, who don't have a voice on the table? What about the voiceless? What about the plants, the animals who can't express themselves, yeah? And where do they stand in all this discourse? So I think a lot of elements, and we all have that responsibility in terms of bringing, things to the table. One of the points you shared, that's actually is an organic handover to Ravi. So you said that about the role of education institutions, about, in the entire ESG. So Ravi, you have been in from ISDM, and you have been at the cusp of, development and management, dialogues all through. So would be very interesting to hear from you, and on what your perspective is. So I won't get into a longish question. Just feel free to.
Sure. No, thank you so much, and such a pleasure to be here. So I'm from the Indian School of Development Management, and we're a sort of unique school trying to figure out management for the social sector. So we think of management very differently, and I'd like to bring that perspective into this discussion. It's nice to see 3 of our alumni also in the hall today. So it's really wonderful that that sort of people and messages are going across. And I want to go back and draw your attention to the title of this panel discussion, which is ESG for everyone. And a lot of what I'm going to say is about the everyone. I think the everyone somewhere has been forgotten. I think you came closest to talking about the villages or the women or the special needs people and so on and so forth. Long back I remember listening to Swami Chinmayananda, who said that there is religion and there is philosophy. When you have philosophy without religion, it becomes too complicated to understand. When you have religion without philosophy, it becomes a superstition. You're just doing something because it's ritualistic and there's no philosophy behind it. And I worry that ESG is forgetting the philosophy and becoming a ritual. And that's a very dangerous thing, because the whole purpose of ESG is to understand, while businesses have created the biggest wealth or prosperity that humankind has seen, it's also burst all limits of the planet. It's created the greatest inequality that the world has ever seen. And we shouldn't forget that that's why ESG was in the first place put up as a framework by some of the large companies who were under tremendous pressure, or UN when it wrote its first book on trying to make it worthwhile for businesses by saying who cares wins. And I think it's an unfortunate title. I would like that title to change to, it doesn't matter who wins, everyone should care, because that should be the whole attitude of it. the risk we run is that we think of ESG increasingly, and I'm not saying everyone, and it's not fair to use these broad brushes, that it's becoming something by which you compete for better customers, better investments, better returns, because you're compliant, because you're whatever. Now, that's okay. That's a short-term benefit for the business, and I think that's perfectly justified for any business to do it. But the philosophy of why you're doing it in the first place is the damage we have done, and how do we undo that damage of the planetary boundaries, of the social constructs that exist. And if you think about who is affected the most by climate, by inequality, by various social injustices, it is the weakest sections of society. And is the voice of that weakest section of society coming into the ESG dialogues? It is not, is my submission to all of you, and I think you were beginning to talk about how we need to get the villages involved. We have to figure out how do we get the voices of the people who are suffering the brunt of what we are undoing into the discussion. Otherwise, we'll just continue to do what we are doing, and I can guarantee you we'll meet in 20 years from now and talk about how ESG needs to be even more stringent and so on and so forth. Now, how do we get the voices of the individuals? And this is where I'd like to sort of back, if you like, where I come from, which is the not-for-profit sector. I think it's the not-for-profit sector who are the closest to the weakest sections of society. So if you can't talk directly to the weakest sections of society, talk to the not-for-profits, the NGOs, whatever you want to call them. And that's very important, and I don't see that. I don't see enough representation of not-for-profits in the discussions on policies, on structures, on various sort of guidelines that we are developing for ESG. And unless we do that, we will remain this way. I mean, today, like I was telling you, if you take the country itself, in just 2 years of COVID, 210 million, that's the Azim Premji University report, 210 million people have gone below poverty line. And poverty line in India is an abject poverty line. And at the same time, you had the highest number of new dollar billionaires in the country. Last year, we had 48 billionaires come out of India out of 142. That's the highest that India has ever seen. And this year, by the way, we're doing one a week. So we'll have about 55 new billionaires. So we are creating inequality. And if ESG doesn't start recognizing that there is a fundamental problem we are trying to address of inequality, we have a problem, for example, with the young population in this country. Everybody calls it a demographic dividend. We have a huge young population, unlike a lot of developed countries like Japan, for example, who have a very aging population. Now, unless you create and have serious discussions about opportunity, about ability, about agency of this youth, I guarantee you they'll become a demographic curse. And these are discussions one is not hearing. One is only hearing about how the company is doing things so that its customers are happier, its investors are happier, its stakeholders are happier. And I'd really like to shake these discussions up and see, can we get discussions around how do we involve the weakest sections? How are the real metrics changing on the ground about the inequality in the country? Even today, we have 13 million children who die every year of very preventable diseases. How do we stop that? Every second child in this country is either, wasted or stunted or malnutrition. How do we change that? What is the level of women participation in this country's employment and labor force? Unless we ask these fundamental questions, we can have these nice debates on ESG, and it will be purely ritualistic, and it will achieve nothing. Sorry to put a spanner in the work, but I really believe that.
Thanks, Ravi, and being so direct about it, and also speaking for the social impact space, and diversity, bringing diversity. Maybe that might be one of the, clues for the organizers here, that diversity, and diversity of voice and inclusion in the ESG space is one separate, complex topic in itself, which I think most of the sectors struggle. We in the social impact space also struggle with it quite a lot. So just to put it there, that social impact space, which is the NGO, so-called NGO community, also has got fair share of challenges. I mean, just to add on from there, say for example, we are talking about just a small program like the early child care program. Yeah. If we apply all the diversity and DNI lens, the environment lens, just one example is say if you to just provide non-toxic, sustainable toys, cost nearly 3x more. Yeah? But most of the donors, so it's the same dilemma. Actually, if you see the dilemma on the corporate side, if you see, the dilemma is about how to keep investors happy. Investors are always concerned about profit. Yeah? And over here also, it's because the dependency, always corporates' dependency with the investors is very high. You always are actually trying to, balance it. Yeah? You don't want to make so much investment that it will eat into your profits, make the investors unhappy. When the NGO's relationship with the donor fraternity, which also includes the corporate, is the same. You might want to do more, okay, but nobody is willing to do that additional for the planet, for the people, for the voices, because it adds on to the cost, and suddenly, it is not viable, yeah, in many sense. So just actually talking about certain of the, drawing a common parallel between the dialogues. But very, very insightful, I would say that, I think what the companies are doing within their space, and we are seeing that the dialogue in India has reached after 15 years. I mean, even so late, and that also, initially it got influenced by all the global discussions and the global multinational culture, which actually was under pressure, to act on it. But there were always, a ray of hope, even like what Mr. Rajiv said, that, if there are islands of passion, yeah, which do it because of the cause of it. And that's why when I mentioned that, actually, where do you lie on the horizon? Do you look at a traditional or a pragmatist approach, that, okay, you're doing it just because, the law tells you to do, or you are actually on the idealist, you're moving your spectrum where that's the right thing to do. That is actually that the mission for saving the planet, to having a good quality of life, like I was so happy to see in the Hondas, the quality of life and all those, parameters. And if you keep on seeing that vision, okay, that is what we really aspire for. Yeah. And even on the social space, I think a lot is moving. Now, you wouldn't have seen menopause over here. Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, I think 5-7 years back, 10 years back, you wouldn't have seen, something like that actually being figured, or, talking about the LGBTQ community and, where do they figure in the entire dialogue. So I think we are making a lot of progress, but a lot more needs to be done. And I think I'll just rest it here that, hearing from all you folks on your insights has been really, really good. Yeah. I'll take maybe if there is time, I don't know, there's 2 questions or something from the audience. One question. Yes, please. Please introduce yourselves. Yeah.
Hello. Very good discussion. I am Mohit Sharma from Delhi Skill and Entrepreneurship University. So my question is particularly to Ravi. When we are talking about ESG and all these things, what is your institution is doing in particular, for building these skills and sensitivity in leaders, and what are other educational institutions, higher educational institutions that are producing future leaders who will be custodians of ESG and other things? How are they doing? And I'm sure that they are not doing what is required. And what is the way forward for them to become sensitive and to start building this thing in leaders very early on? Thank you.
Thank you. And I know you've given us this thumb on the Adam's apple to keep it short. So at ISDM, we work a lot on mindsets. And we always say that work has to happen with the head, heart, and hand. Unfortunately, a lot of work, sometimes in the social sector, happens only with the heart. Very often in the corporate sector, it happens more with just the head. And unless you bring everything together, so that's really at a very fundamental level, how do you bring the person into the whole process and things like that? In terms of higher education, I have one comment to make, which is that unfortunately, and I know the work you guys are doing is amazing at the Skilling University in Delhi, but it has become very siloed. And no problem in the world can be solved by a siloed approach. Every problem in the world can only be solved with a horizontal approach where you bring many aspects together. None of our teaching works like that. You're either an engineering college or an arts college or a science college or a journalism school or whatever. You have to start getting people to, be able to become critical thinkers, problem solvers, ability to think of new ways in a certain situation that you're thrown into, understanding context. Higher education needs to change in our country. Even our premier institutions, and I come from an IIT and an IIM, has not created new knowledge for this country. It has received knowledge from somewhere or the other in the world. And we have to change higher education, and that's a hugely important role if society has to change. So yeah, thanks for that question, but that would be my, so yeah, it was short.
Thank you so much, everyone. Let's give a big round of applause to the panelists.